Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and I'll try to hurry this up. And I think I'm just going to kind of go off the revenue sheet here in terms of what this bill is all about. A provision to the tax to index the rate of tax, or pardon me, rate of per pack of cigarettes was conducted in 2013 with the increase of $2.83 per pack. The cigarette excise tax is indexed annually by multiplying factor. I won't go into. On January 1st, 2017, the rate increased from $3 a pack to $3.04 a pack. For each container, and this is also within this bill, of moist snuff, there's a minimum tax imposed equal to the pack of pack of cigarettes. And so the proposed law would suggest that we repeal the provision to index the tax rate of cigarettes, the tax excise rate per pack, and a minimum tax on a container moist snuff would remain at $3.04. So it's basically to take the inflator off a pack of cigarettes and to impose the same level of taxation for a can or canister of snuff as a pack of cigarettes. And I just say this: it's all about. I happen to be one that believes that you enact tax policy by vote, not by automatic index. That's the only reason I'm bringing this to the table today. I think legislators ought to vote on tax policy as opposed to letting the so-called automatic pilot flow. So, Mr. Chair, that's all.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brian Carr. I'm the Government Relations Director and Legal Counsel at the Minnesota Retailers Association. We are a statewide trade association that represents small, Main Street, regional, and national retailers across the state of Minnesota. Today, I'd like to voice our support for Senator Senjem's Senate File 1051, which has bipartisan support. Included in your packets is a one-pager with a list of organizations supporting this file, as well as a document from Holiday Companies, retailer, discussing the exact price disparity that they face in the Midwest in their operations. Members, this legislation would remove an autopilot tax increase, as the Senator outlined, on a legal Minnesota product. Minnesota is already the only state to assess a separate state excise tax on cigarettes that adjusts annually depending on the average price of a pack. Our concern with the auto inflator is twofold, members. First, Minnesota has not one but two automatic adjustment mechanisms that are on autopilot to increase taxes on cigarettes and other tobacco products. Removing the auto inflator does not roll back tobacco taxes. In fact, the bill would freeze the current excise tax and maintain just one automatic adjustment instead of two. In 2013, the state excise tax increased by 130%. Minnesota now has the 7th highest tax rate for cigarettes in the country, and the automatic adjustment drives consumer prices to a level that is simply uncompetitive for our retailers. The increase happens without any legislative oversight and is paid by Minnesota consumers. Secondly, in some cases, the 2013 increase resulted in tobacco product sales losses of 50% or more. The problem has been exacerbated, members, along our borders and in greater Minnesota communities, where a recently updated economic impact study estimates that more than 2,800 jobs have been lost since 2013 increase. Minnesota is losing approximately $38 million per year in tax revenue due to lost sales from non-tobacco products. And now over 35% of all tobacco products consumed in Minnesota are brought in from other states. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this measure was in last year's omnibus tax bill that passed the legislature with bipartisan support. Again, we are not asking to roll back any taxes today. Our request is simply to keep the state to one mechanism that adjusts automatically instead of two. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Remaining members, any comments, questions? Mr. Cummings, you had a comment or two? Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Paul Cummings, and I'm the Tax Policy Manager with the Minnesota Department of Revenue. I was able to connect with Senator Senjem yesterday via email. A majority of my comments will be to this bill, Mr. Chair. Then I will provide short comments in order to not provide testimony on the next bill. So I will be brief. We very much respect Senator Senjem and the work on his committee, so I'll reiterate that my comments are to the bill. The purpose of the cigarette tax increase in 2013 was to balance the budget, make strategic investments in healthcare, education, jobs, and to reduce smoking in Minnesota, in particular among its youth. Since the increase took effect, smoking has declined, most notably among high school students. The steeper decline in smoking that happened after the tax increase didn't occur in other states comparable to Minnesota that did not enact changes to their tobacco taxation laws. The percent of high school students who smoked cigarettes in the past 30 days dropped from 18% in 2011 to 10% in 2014, the steepest decline ever recorded by the Minnesota Teens and Tobacco Survey. Adult smokers reported that in 2013, cigarette tax increase influenced their smoking behaviors, with 61% thinking about quitting, 48% cutting down on smoking, 44% making quit attempts, all according to the Minnesota Adult Tobacco Survey. Among smokers who successfully quit in the past year, 63% reported that it helped to keep them from smoking again. Eliminating the inflator on this tax will make cigarettes more affordable for our youth who are more price sensitive years down the road. Removing the inflator over time would lower the cost of cigarettes over time in real dollars. For these reasons, Governor Dayton has been critical of this proposal in the past and continues to oppose it today. Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith support a balanced, common sense approach in their budget that protects the state's long-term fiscal health. In fiscal year 2021, the cost of this bill will be $21 million. That figure only grows over time. It will be important to ensure long-term fiscal balance with any budget that is passed. To be clear, Mr. Chair, we are concerned about lowering taxes on tobacco products in this bill and other bills today, including the tax cuts on premium cigars, cigarettes, and vapor products. The next bill on the agenda would lower taxes on products manufactured by the largest tobacco companies, while increasing taxes on vape shops. In addition, it would allow for sampling of vapor products, which could expand the availability of tobacco products to new users. Governor Dayton and Lieutenant Governor Smith have proposed an updated vapor taxation method without lowering taxes on products manufactured by the largest tobacco companies. If this bill moves through the process, the Department of Revenue looks forward to working with you, Mr. Chair, Senator Senjem, members, and staff. We thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Members, any questions for the testifiers? Senator Senjem on this particular bill?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for hearing this, and I think we all recognize and accept and appreciate the fact that we don't, I would suggest no one smoke, but the fact of the matter is people do, and kids do, and it's heartwarming to hear that kids are smoking less. I'm not necessarily sure it's because of the dollars. I think we have to realize, Mr. Chair, as we think about all of this, that there's a report on your desk I just looked at, 35.7% of the packs of cigarettes coming into Minnesota are smuggled. So, I mean, where do they go? I don't know. But if we want to, in my opinion, get rid of cigarettes, let's do it at the tax table with our tax. Let's not let the inflator do it. I think people ought to vote on cigarette taxes and, frankly, any other kind of taxes as opposed to indexes. So that's my comment on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. Well stated. With that, Senate File 1051 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you. Senator Senjem, 1052, the tobacco ride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and there are no amendments here as well. And if you don't mind, I'll just continue on.
I don't mind.
Okay. So this is about vapor products related to electronic cigarettes, and I'm going to really abbreviate this one, Mr. Chair and members. This is one of those devices that so-called large tobacco industries make. This is the nicotine component of this, and this is the battery component, and so on. You put them together and charge them up, and you can make smoke. And this is, if you will, taxed 95% excise tax on whatever this thing sells for. That's the tax. Now I don't have a reusable device, but were this reasonable. You'd go down, you'd buy this, you'd buy your solutions as well. You'd put your solution in here and have your electronic cigarette. Now that's not taxed at all. So the whole point of this bill is can we, should we, ought to we, from the standpoint of tax policy, tax nicotine in an equal sort of way. And the bill suggests that we do that, and that's my introduction, and that's what the bill proposes, and I'll stand for either questions or we can go right to the witnesses.
Thank you very much. I see 3 testifiers. Again, I ask you to kind of keep the focus on, and if, don't repeat the testimony, keep it focused, please. So please state your name for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tom Bryant. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Wholesale Marketers Association, Tobacco Wholesale Trade Association here in the state. Senate File 1052 would improve the method by which electronic cigarettes are taxed. Minnesota was the first state to tax electronic cigarettes. First at 70% of the wholesale price, and then later in 2013 at 95% of the wholesale price. I've passed out this map, if you have it there, and it shows the 5 states which tax currently e-cigarettes. Minnesota at 95%, then Kansas and 3 other states tax on a per milliliter basis, on per milliliter of nicotine solution. Kansas is 20 cents per milliliter, Louisiana and North Carolina are both 5 cents per milliliter, and then West Virginia is 7.5 cents per milliliter, a different tax method. Pennsylvania, the only other state that taxes on a percent of wholesale price at 40%. While the state did not intend the 95% tax rate to impact e-cigarette sales, that's exactly what is happening. Wholesalers that I represent and their retailers do not sell many. In fact, the fiscal note for this same bill in 2015 indicated that there'd be a tax revenue reduction of $4.4 million. The fiscal note for this year's version of the same bill is $2.2 million. Per year. So it does show that these kind of sales are declining because the tax is simply too high. I brought with me 2 examples of e-cigarettes that are a closed system where there's a sealed cartridge of nicotine, much as Senator Senjem reviewed with you. This is an e-cigarette kit. It comes in 2 parts. You have a USB charger that recharges the battery that's in this end. This screws off, and this is the nicotine cartridge. It contains about 1 milliliter of nicotine. It's replaceable, it's reusable. Now the tax on this unit is 95%, but it's only 95% of the replacement cartridge. The tax is $1.71 on this cartridge. The whole unit retails for about $14.99. So we have $1.71. This is a disposable e-cigarette unit. You have a cartridge, but once you use it, you throw the whole thing away. There's no recharger. It can only be used once. It's a one and done. The tax on the cartridge here is $4.09 for the same amount of nicotine because the wholesalers break out the cost of the cartridge from the whole unit and they apply the 95% to that. So $1.71 and $4.09. That's the kind of disparity that the bill here, Senate File 1052, would correct. There is one other kind of e-cigarette, and that is what is called a tank or mod type. It has a larger apparatus where you pour liquid nicotine solution into it from a small bottle. In that case as well, only the bottle of nicotine is taxed at the 95% rate, not the whole unit. What is really needed is tax parity in the state, and we appreciate that the governor understands the disparity that currently exists, and he has included some other various provisions in his tax bill to try and address that very fact. So we'd encourage you to support Senate File 1052. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Next.
My name's Steve Gentry. I'm with RAI Services Company, a subsidiary of Reynolds American. One of our subsidiaries manufactures a vapor product, Views, which is a digital cigarette. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As you know, vapor products is relatively new, and Vice Chairman Surgeon has explained, and my counterpart has also talked about the different types of products. Basically, as they mentioned, you can break down the vapor market into 2 sections: closed systems, which covers the cartridges that was talked about, and each segment accommodates the consumers in terms of providing them specific. It accommodates the specific preferences that the consumer looks for in buying the particular product. For closed systems, consumers look forward to being able to buy those replacement cartridges at traditional retail outlets. And they don't want to get into having to refill those cartridges, which is not the intent of them to begin with. The second segment, which is the open systems, where they can pour it in themselves, they'll buy their tank and their separate bottle of e-liquid and fill it themselves. For those consumers, and just like closed systems, there's a large majority of consumers who prefer to have the control and the variety in terms of the flavors of e-liquid that they use, as well as the nicotine strength that they want to consume. In both cases, both segments are very critical in the overall success of the vapor market in terms of accommodating those preferences of the consumers. And as you know, in 2012, Minnesota Department of Revenue issued a revenue notice that affirmed the state's position that e-cigarettes fit the definition of a tobacco product. Therefore, it was subject to a tobacco tax. And this caused two things to occur. For closed systems, the price of the closed system approached or exceeded the price of a pack of combustible cigarettes. So if I'm someone who's looking to switch to potentially a lower risk product, I'm having to pay as much, if not more, than what I would traditionally pay for a regular pack of combustible cigarettes. In addition, it creates the incentive for the consumers to look elsewhere as far as alternative suppliers to these closed systems. Alternative suppliers in terms of online websites, and you can go to a neighboring state and buy the same product. If you live along the border of Minnesota, you can go into a neighboring state that has chosen not to tax this product and basically purchase the same thing for half the price. We've seen evidence that the number of cartridges that are shipped into Minnesota and sold is less than half of what is sold in the neighboring states around Minnesota. So not only are the retailers at a competitive disadvantage, the state is put in a precarious position of not being able to collect the tax that it would otherwise anticipate collecting. So we thank you for allowing me to come up here to voice support of this bill. We believe that a 30-cent per milliliter tax as proposed by this bill would address the concerns in terms of lowering the price, making it equal across all vapor products because you're focusing on the consumable material, and you're enticing consumers to purchase their products in Minnesota and not outside the state, which would allow the state to collect that revenue. For these reasons, we support this bill.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can you fill in the gaps? Are there any gaps left? I don't want to be disrespectful, but
I'll be short. The only thing I was asked to do as a former budget director was estimate the revenues for 18 and 19. The estimate for 30 cents would be 1.6 million and 1.7 million in fiscal 19, based upon trends. That would be the addition.
Okay. I'm sorry, would you please state your name for the record? I forgot. Please state your name for the record.
Bill Kipe, Kipe Government Solutions. I'm a consultant to Reynolds American.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that, we have some other testifiers. So, gentlemen, I have to ask you to step back for a moment. And Molly Mullion, Ms. Godfrey, and Dr. Danilo. We have Cap O'Rourke and Tim Coaster. So we were kind of over this ground. I kind of know where you're going. We've been over this ground a little bit, and I am going to be emphatic. Make this to the tax policy, else I will stop the testimony. We have a couple more things to get to, and we don't need to, So welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Molly Moylanen, and I work for Clearway, Minnesota. I'm also co-chair of Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generation, and we're here to express our concerns with Senate File 1052. Now, we've been tracking the language in this bill as R.J. Reynolds and other tobacco companies shop it around state capitals all across the country. As they invest in the loosely regulated e-cigarette market, a new frontier for them, their goal is to set up state tax structures that favor their current brands and future products. This is concerning to us for many reasons. First, this bill introduces a number of new terms, including the term vapor products. State statute already has a definition for electronic delivery devices, e-cigarettes, so I think it's important to understand exactly what products will be subject to the extremely low tax. Because there is already a different definition in Minnesota statute as well, introducing a new term to cover likely the same products appears unnecessary and is likely to cause confusion for enforcement. Further, the new definition states vapor products does not include any product regulated as a drug or device by the U.S. FDA. Now, last August, the FDA finalized a rule extending their regulatory authority to cover all tobacco products, including vaporizers, vape pens, hookah pens, electronic cigarettes, e-pipes, and all other electronic delivery devices. So again, this begs the question, what products actually fall within this new definition and why is it necessary? I also want to point out another section that is likely in conflict with the FDA's rule. Line 4.16 of the bill states that vapor products are not subject to the prohibition on distribution, meaning you can distribute vapor products anywhere, anytime. The federal deeming rule prohibits distribution of free samples of nicotine-based electronic delivery devices. Again, according to federal law, free samples of nicotine-based EDDs, electronic delivery devices, and their components and parts cannot be distributed in tobacco product shops or anywhere else. Another concerning point is right above on line 4.15. This line confirms current law allowing the distribution of samples of tobacco if distributed in tobacco stores. However, the term tobacco stores is not defined in Minnesota statute. There is a definition for tobacco product shops in Section 144, Minnesota's Clean Indoor Air Act, but even if you were using that definition here, if the shop has no open displays, sampling is allowed and minors may be allowed to hang out there too. Finally, under the new tax mechanism, the tax would drop significantly on the types of e-cigarettes that traditional cigarette companies make and that are sold in convenience stores, gas stations, and other places like Walgreens frequented by youth. We shouldn't make these products even more attractive by cutting prices. Taxing all e-cigarettes appropriately will help keep them out of kids' hands. No amount of nicotine in e-cigarettes or otherwise is safe for kids. Minnesota 11th graders report using e-cigs at rates twice as high as cigarettes. And new research shows that vaping may be a one-way bridge to cigarette smoking among youth. As this committee contemplates an appropriate tax approach for e-cigarettes, Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generation supports the approach put forward in the governor's tax bill and in Senator Dietzig's bill, Senate File 1537. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's go to this young man here, as we've heard the doctor before. So welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Well, first I would like to start off by saying good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
And committee. My name is Trayel Jaquan Godfrey, and I live in St. Paul. I've been working to prevent youth tobacco use since I was 11 years old. The tobacco industry is still determined to find new ways to appeal to youth. One way is by promoting exciting, new, cheap products like e-cigarettes. There are many types of e-cigarettes, some of which come candy and fruity flavors. Both flavored and unflavored tobacco is addictive and bad for kids. The type of e-cigarettes that get a tax break in this bill are the ones you see in the corner stores where kids go to buy things after school. We see them all the time. E-cigarettes or vapes are very popular among people my age. One of my friends was bragging about all the different flavors he had tried. He doesn't realize he may become addicted to these dangerous products or even move on to real cigarettes. I hope that each and every one of you will take a stand to prevent youth tobacco use. You may not realize it when you see adults smoking, but most of those adults started while they were kids. And they would take it back if they could. Cheap e-cigarettes are just another trick to get them started. If you take strong action today, kids won't have to struggle with years of addiction. You'll be helping the kids and the grandparents of the future. With your help, change is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. And Doctor, do you have anything to add? I mean, really.
Yes, thank you again, Dr. Pete Donnell, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I am with the Twin Cities Medical Society and the Physician Advocacy Network, and I am also a resident of Senator Franson's district. Tobacco costs Minnesota a lot of money, healthcare costs, loss of productivity.
I'm sorry, Doctor, we understand that. That's, I don't mean to be rude, but we've been there. We know that. You said that the last time you were up here. So do you have something to add about the danger and hazards that related to tax policy? If not, we do have more testifiers. So I don't mean to be rude, but we've been there.
Yes, thank you. So yes, tax policy does influence behavior, especially with kids. E-cigarettes are a gateway for kids, and it's important for Minnesota to be strong to help reduce the likely adoption of e-cigarette use, because all nicotine comes from tobacco. At the end of the day, all nicotine starts in tobacco products, and that's the connection.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Again, I don't mean to be rude, just we got other folks to do. So thank you. We have two other testifiers, Mr. Cap O'Rourke and Tim Goster. Thank you very much, testifiers. Thank you, gentlemen. We've got a few minutes left, and we still have Senator Rest's bill, so I'm going to ask you to cut right to it.
Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the record. My name is Cap O'Rourke, and I'm here representing the Independent Vapor Retailers Association of Minnesota. We have a number of shop owners here that are highly concerned about the effects of this bill. They represent businesses in Wade Park, Brainerd, Rogers, Alexandria, Minneapolis, Woodbury, St. Paul, Chaska, Coon Rapids, Prior Lake, and Shakopee. This bill, contrary to what has been described, it drastically changes the method in which these products are taxed. And it doesn't treat all nicotine equally. And as evidenced by that, what this would do is it would take an open system bottle, which tend to have larger amounts of liquid and lower concentrations of nicotine, and it would change the tax to change it by 30 cents per milliliter. What that essentially does is it provides no incentive to create lower nicotine products. So to give you a rundown, in the open system industry, which is currently in the U.S., it's about the e-cigarette industry in the U.S. is about a $3.7 billion industry. About 60 to 65% of that industry is made up of small businesses that serve what they call the open system market. So our average bottle is anywhere from 30 milliliters to 60 milliliters, and our average nicotine strength 3 years ago was between 1.2% and 1.8%, and it has now dropped to somewhere between 0.3 and 0.6%. If you look at the products made by Big Tobacco, in fact, Senator Senjem, do you have the device that you use? The device that Senator Senjem had, this device right here, this has a nicotine concentration of 5%. So as Senator Senjem said earlier, we want to treat all nicotine the same. This has over 5 times the amount of nicotine per milliliter that a product like this would contain. We are not treating all nicotine the same. We are, in fact, giving a break in this bill to the higher doses of nicotine in the lower amounts. These products also do not have the ability, do not tend to gradiate down in their nicotine strength. So a typical user of an open system that comes into a vape shop will often be asked what they smoke and how often, and they will be set up at a level that mimics what the amount of nicotine they're taking now. And over the course of a number of months, that shop often will start to wean that person down from their nicotine strength to ultimately trying to get them to zero nicotine. There are a number of people, in fact, it's growing. There's a shop in Minnesota that's told me that 60% of his sales account for zero nicotine. That means there's no nicotine in the fluid they're using, and the reason that they continue to vape is simply a physical addiction of hand to mouth, wanting to still have something that they're doing. This bill would have a drastic tax increase for all products made in Minnesota. Currently on a 30 milliliter bottle, we pay less than $1 in final product, and it retails for about $20. This tax would go up to $8, and on the 60 ml bottles, which are becoming more prevalent, would go up to $16 for a 60 milliliter bottle. This is the number one choice for people in Minnesota who are looking to reduce or quit smoking, according to the last Minnesota Adult Tobacco Survey, and this would put a huge hurdle, if not close all the shops in Minnesota that are selling these open systems. I have with me Mr. Tim Kester, who is the president of our association.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. Kester, you have, please state your name for the record. Welcome to the committee, and if you have something to add to this testimony.
Thank you, committee members. My name is Tim Kester. I am the president of the Independent Vapor Retailers in Minnesota and a small business owner. I own 4 stores in the Twin Cities metro area that employ about 35 people. And Mr. O'Rourke gave you kind of the, view from 10,000 feet of how this bill would affect the industry, and I'd like to kind of scale it back and talk how exactly it would affect my business. As Mr. O'Rourke stated, the most popular e-liquid products that I sell today are 60 milliliter bottles. There's been a trend in the industry of going to lower nicotine strengths, larger bottle sizes at lower prices. So a 60 milliliter bottle generally will retail for $26, and under this proposal would command $18 in tax. So that's certainly a situation where the state of Minnesota is making much more off of that bottle sold than I am. What does that look like to my business in general? Well, that would be an annual increase of over $1 million in tax for my business. And so what do I do with an extra $1 million tax burden? I can eat that cost. Well, I can tell you I drove here today in a 2009 RAV4, and if you think that I have an extra $1 million to pay in tax a year, and I would be choosing that as my mode of transportation, you should probably think again. My business does around $3 million in annual revenue. You're looking at, it'd be somewhere be just north of $2 million by the time I pay cost of goods sold and employee costs. So now adding in that extra $1 million in revenue, I'm already losing money, and that's before paying rent, utilities, let alone paying myself for trying to grow my business. So this would be, devastating for me if I tried to absorb that tax. I can alternatively pass that tax on to the consumer, but citing those numbers again, that $26 standard retail price across the country bottle now costs $44 for me to sell it. And just like the testimony you heard on the cigar issue earlier, my biggest competitor isn't my colleagues here who also own vape shops. It's online competition. I can't honestly sit here and say, if you pass this bill, this is I'm for sure going to close down, but it sure seems like the most likely scenario to me, because knowing my customers and that they're already very savvy online shoppers and do quite a bit of online shopping for their vapor products, I know that my sales are going to plummet, and I'm going to have a real hard time staying in business. Who loses in that situation? Obviously I do. I will need to find a new way to put food on my family's table. My employees lose. They need to find new ways to support their families. But that's not where it ends. The state of Minnesota loses. Revenue loses because we are no longer paying any property taxes, income taxes, or the hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales tax that I remit every year. And the consumers lose because, while current consumers may have no problem switching and buying their stuff online where they can find it cheaper, new consumers who have not yet been exposed to these products and are looking for a safer alternative to cigarettes won't have the benefit of being able to come into a shop, learn about products which can oftentimes be very complex, especially older customers who've been smoking for decades, and if they're, like my parents, they have sometimes a hard time working a cell phone and find it very intimidating to try to navigate how to use these technical products. So that concludes my testimony.
Well, that's good timing. Thank you, Mr. Kaser. So with that, I think we should wrap it up. Senator Senjem, final comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for holding this hearing. I think we found out that...
One second. Senator Dietzick, as a question.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I will be quick, because we have heard this before. If this bill does move forward and is included, I would like to hear at some point in the future, I don't want to discuss it now because of time, but how the federal deeming rule impacts the language on 2.15, 2.16, and then in Section 4. We can do that later if you want.
Thank you for bringing it up, Senator Dietzick. That was brought to our attention. I think we can, Ms. Pollock, can you talk about that briefly? Thank you for reminding us.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dietzick, there were some extensive regulations passed in August 2016, and my understanding of them is that they the regulations will allow existing vapor e-cigarette manufacturers to apply for compliance with the FDA, to be regulated by the FDA, and so in the meantime would be selling their products as is. If the FDA does not approve the application, then ostensibly those products would be taken off the market. I think as with many things that we do in the tax committee, we have delayed effective dates, and so as this language is written now, there's not a conflict with the FDA rules. And I would also just note that the FDA rule prohibiting samples that is a little bit distinguished. Samples are allowed, but with a kind of a nominal fee. So that the provision in this bill is also not in conflict with the FDA rules. But as with many things, I think we'll have to wait and see how those evolve, and if they would present a conflict with the provisions of this bill if it were enacted.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Senator Dietzick, follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then this Section 9, lines 4.19 to 416, since it is a commerce statute, have they requested to hear this bill at all?
Senator Dietzick, not to my knowledge.
And Mr. Chair and Senator Dietzick, not to my knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that, then, Senator Senjem, I'm sorry we interrupted you.
Well, I'll be incredibly brief. Thank you for the hearing, and trying to find equity in terms of taxing nicotine solutions is obviously needs to be a work in progress. But hopefully we can go forward and see if we can't find a happy hunting ground on this one, because there are inequities, and I think we need to work on those.
Thank you, Senator Senjem. With that, Senate File 1052 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you very much, testifiers. Thank you, Senator Senjem. Senator Rest, thank you for your patience. Senate File 1644. I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Senate File 1644 is a proposal that changes in a way that we think is an improvement in equity and clarity of the way in which non-resident Minnesotans.
One moment, Senator Rest. I know everybody's filing out, but if you're going to, please file out before you chat.
I can't imagine why they're not staying for this bill.
Stay, sit, listen. Free admission. So, thank you very much. Please continue, Senator Rest.
Thank you. So it is a way that we think addresses equity issues, fairness issues for the way in which Minnesota goes about taxing the income earned by non-residents who are members of corporate boards of directors. And it's a fairly complicated calculation. Currently, it's a complicated calculation. There's a disagreement also on whether these board members should be considered employees of boards or whether they should be considered independent contractors. There's disagreement, and when I'm saying disagreement, I mean with the Department of Revenue over whether someone is in the business of being a board member. But we want to offer this bill as an opportunity to have a discussion on that. The current revenue estimate is some, $6 million or so in tax relief for these folks. 5.7 million 18 and 5.9 in 19. The Minnesota Business Partnership is here to lend its support. They don't need to testify unless there are any questions. And I want to note that the department does oppose this bill, and Mr. Cummings has indicated he does not need to testify as long as I indicate their disagreement and opposition.
Okay.
And that's it.
Thank you, Senator Ress. Well, you made a complicated issue fairly concise. So essentially what you're talking about here is changing the way in this case, board members compute their time spent in Minnesota for Minnesota state tax purposes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Members remaining, any questions? Seeing, you sure? Senator Frenzy, you have a question? Oh, okay. All right. All right, members, with that, Senate File 1644 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are adjourned. Tomorrow, we have TIF.